Welcome to the July 20th edition of the PFF Forecast. I'm George. I'm joined by Eric as usual. We're going to talk about a lot of fun things. We've got some bets that you shouldn't make. Okay. We're going to warn the people, bets you shouldn't make. We also have a bet to make though. Got to make up for it. I have to ask Eric about a show, dinner and a show that he went to, which is going to be exciting. And we also we're playing vigilante here. Okay. We've done some conversations about betting behind the scenes. We've called out some people who haven't really been super truthful about stuff, and we're continuing. We're marching right along. It's going to be a great show. Let's rock. I don't even know what to start with because there's so much great content here. But I guess I will start with this, and I'll set the scene by saying you and I have rather different schedules. You're more of a night owl. I tend to get up super early. So but last night I'm up kind of late. So I'm trying to grind through some stuff. And you are in hell or something like it. You are what I would describe as my personal purgatory, which was a show combined with dinner, and the show was called Footloose, and I have no idea what that is about.
Yeah, and I wouldn't characterize it as hell. I know family members listen to the show. My mother.
I'm saying for me.
My mother was extremely generous. Now, my mother was extremely generous. My sister and her new husband are very into theater. I would consider myself a cultured person, but I only have so much time in my life. So I don't make I once went to a performance of Rent with my college girlfriend in Calgary, Alberta. And at the end, she was like, "Did you know what this was about?" And I go, "No." I was completely, so I resolved last night. So Chanhassen Dinner Theater in Minneapolis, it's you sit down and they give you food, and then they play the thing, and then during intermission they come back with more, and it kind of honestly made me want to drink again, but it finishes, right. But they loved it, and that's all that counts. But I know during the whole thing I'm thinking, because Footloose is about a pastor's daughter who takes up with a person that moves in from Chicago, a big city, and he doesn't approve of it. And it was kind of I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about does my mom know what this movie, the plot is about? Because it was kind of I'm not sure she would have suggested it to me had she known. But it was very well performed. Honestly, I think it amazes me how good these actors are that are doing this isn't even community theater. They're paid for it, but obviously these are not Broadway stars or whatever, but they were very good. But yeah, for me, it was okay, we get there at 5:30. It doesn't start till 8. So I'm what are we doing here? What do I do with my hands for 2.5 hours? And then so then I know I know it's going to be a while. So I order coffee, and the gal, bless her heart, comes out with the whole pot and puts it on the table. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So then now I'm drinking coffee. Now I have to go to the bathroom right before the show starts. I come back. By the way, former governor of Minnesota, Arnie Carlson, was also in I think he was sitting right next to me. And so I come back, and then I got to go to the bathroom immediately because I haven't had that much coffee in forever. But I'm not seeing anybody move around. And there's a lot of old people in this place. And so I'm thinking to myself, is it against the rules to get up during? Do I have to wait the first intermission?
And you just are going to go light the bathroom
literally
up.
Sweating out this show. And eventually I just turned to Stephanie and I go, "Steph, I'm getting up right now." She's like, "Oh yeah, go ahead." I'm like, but then I'm I'm this big tree walking through this to the bathroom. And then I, of course, wait until the intermission to come back upstairs again to watch the rest of it. Like I said, it was very well performed. it was long for sure. But I'm glad that my sister and her husband had a good time. I think it's not necessarily my wife and I's cup of tea, but you get through it. You do things for your family because you love them, and it was a fun time.
I've heard tell of this.
Yeah, it was something.
I have a hot take for you regarding the theater.
Okay.
I thought Hamilton was kind of boring.
I've never been to Hamilton, so I couldn't tell you. I mean,
I thought the performances were amazing, and some of the characters were really, really good, but I was bored, and I fell asleep, and I'm not someone that falls asleep. I don't do that. Like I stay up and watch every part of the movie.
And the other thing, the other bad beat. So I went to a movie. I went to Minions with my daughters like a while back, and I watched. I could not tell you what that movie's about. I was just grinding through Medium posts. I read like 3 chapters of a book. Like I was in it for me at that day, and it was one of those like.
I can't believe you can't figure out what you have a PhD in math and you can't figure out what the Minions.
I literally wasn't paying attention. This should just show you, how hard it is to multitask. And
I'm aware.
And my girlfriend in college, she was in theater and stuff like that. So I was at like Sweeney Todd, and I went to a bunch of these like plays, Cats, and I got to tell you, if I had a smartphone back then, I would have been broken up with really fast, because I think I would have like not paid that much attention, and then if asked about it later, I would have probably gotten dumped due to my response being so pathetic. But yeah, I last night. They make you turn your phones off in there because they're part of some actors like union or something where, and like a lot of comedians are like that, where you can't film them. Like everybody's talking about how transphobic Chappelle is, but no one sees the jokes because they make everybody at the comedy club turn off their phone. Like that's kind of how it is with actors too. So like I wasn't. I actually paid attention. It was like I said, very well acted. Not my cup of tea, but something I would have, that I still thought, could appreciate the talent there.
All right, man of culture. Let's talk about some football here. Let's start with the vigilante. Okay, we'll get to bets that that you shouldn't make and bets that you should make. But we've been the police here. We've been going around. We just need to let people know. Okay. You can't just post shit on the internet that makes no sense and not expect yours truly, for the syndicate, for the people that blood, sweat, and tears that they pour out to learn the truth, that listen to this podcast, like dear members of the syndicate. We're not going to let their internet be polluted with this garbage. So we've got to find it, and we've got to let people know about it. And you, my friend, if you had sent me this article and you would ask me ball sack or just whack, it would have passed, because this is incredible. Do you want to tell the good people what we're talking about here?
Yeah. So there was I think that's, this is something like not dissimilar to what we used to do, like back when we were first starting out. So 2017, looking at like what's called principal component analysis, k-means clustering. Like essentially this gentleman, Darren O'Donohue, on 33rd team, basically looked at a bunch of passing statistics, interestingly.
About
just took a bunch of passing statistics and did k-means clustering on Lamar Jackson. Oh. Now he and back in the day, hey, bro, we've done this before. Instead of like breaking it into 6 clusters, which I always thought was like more I always thought that there were 6 clusters. There's an elite cluster, there's a shit cluster, there's a volatile cluster of good players, there's a volatile cluster of bad players, there is a kind of an average, like a non-volatile cluster of good players, a non-volatile cluster of bad players. And but this person did 3. And said, basically made the argument that outside of Lamar Jackson's MVP season, which by the way, you can't get rid of, like that exists, that Lamar Jackson has not been like an elite quarterback in the NFL. They do use sacks here. They do not do rushing, which I think this is like where I get to this thread. And I didn't mean to make it a thread. I just wanted to make it one tweet.
You're such a social media savant.
I know threads are getting the bad rap right now, even though the algorithm is doing good work with them.
All of the rhythms are just a few of them.
That's an inside joke.
We've been good about not doing many inside jokes.
Yeah.
This for people that are new to the podcast, the whole podcast used to be inside jokes, and people would come to us that worked with us and be like, "What are you talking about on your podcast?"
But my big thing about Lamar Jackson is if you ignore the rushing, if you ignore the gravity that he has, whether we can measure it or not, and I think that we're getting close to being able to measure it, but we're still like, I've tried to do it with like how linebackers move and how and all this kind of stuff. And I want to actually look at the thing we did for Sloan, which was basically like how well do defensive ends get off the ball? Like I kind of want to look at that for when Lamar's playing, just because like my opinion is that defensive ends don't get off the ball against Lamar because it's a fool's errand, right? To get off the ball against Lamar Jackson throwing the football. The issue is like this is very clearly like an answer in search of a solution, which I think is the worst sports analytics undertaking you can do, right? You think that, and we've all done that. Like you think Kirk Cousins is elite. So you like squeeze the data down to like the very like subset of data where he's the best quarterback in the NFL. Or you think that Kirk Cousins sucks and you do the exact same thing. Or you think that Lamar, in the case here, you think Lamar Jackson sucks. So you do an analysis that ignores his rushing, which I'm sorry, but like that is his rushing is game changing, right? And so in my opinion, like you look at, for example, our friend Sam Schwartzstein asked, he's like, does this with other Greg Roman quarterbacks. Colin Kaepernick, more than half of his rushing yards, even in his like explosive 2012 year, were on scrambles. Tyrod Taylor, 75% of his rushing yards under Greg Roman, that they were on scrambles. And you can find this on PFF.com within the lead subscription. Lamar Jackson in his 2019 like record-breaking season for a rusher in the NFL, 38% of his rushing yards were on scrambles, meaning 62% of his production in the run game was design stuff. Like you cannot evaluate Lamar Jackson as a quarterback. And look, I'm the first one to say he's got warts as a thrower, but you can't evaluate him without evaluating the Ravens running game. And I mean the entire running game. And if you do that, it becomes like even the last 2 years. So take out his 2019 season. The Ravens, and I'm just gonna use this to prove the point. Even with the Tyler Huntley games, even with the RG3 games, all that kind of stuff, the Ravens are 10th in EPA per play in the regular season last 2 years.
So that was the data point that I had pulled up, and like, so I have two thoughts. The first is maybe this person is trolling you and they think this is the right way to get you to talk about the running game. Just a thought, just hypothesis. But so you made one really good point around you can't take the MVP season out. Like that's just not like, do the same with Patrick Mahomes, please. Show me. Now I don't know if his machine will be able to do 3 K-means clusters again. It might have retired after that. That's a lot.
That tweet was an amazing tweet.
That's a lot of work, man. Okay.
And again, we don't like, what I don't want to do here is like method shame. Like we were all in this position at one point studying the league. So far be it for me to say, oh, this guy's just using K-means clustering, but like, this is how everything works. Like,
K-means clustering is great, but you can't. The thing that frustrates me, and I'll say this, I have struggled through this as well. I think both of us have, where you use something, and this happens with machine learning techniques all the time. It's like you use something because it's cool, but you don't totally understand how it works. And that prevents you from actually getting a meaningful result out of it. And so I think it's obnoxious to exclude how well Lamar Jackson's offense has done, given the fact, Eric, that he is the offense, whether they are throwing or running the football with Lamar or without Lamar, he is the offense. And let me list for you the teams that have a better EPA per play than the Lamar Jackson-led Baltimore Ravens. The Kansas City Chiefs, who, by the way, are ways way ahead of everybody else. The Green Bay Packers, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Tampa Bay Bucks, the New Orleans Saints. That's it. End of list.
Yeah.
It's 5 teams. Now,
and that's our EPA model. Like Ben Baldwin's in the regular season, 2019 through 2021. So that doesn't include his rookie year, which, again, all these things are unfair to Lamar. But like they're third, and
we could take out his rookie year. I mean, that's only going to help. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, like my big thing is, and this is where I get huffy and puffy about this stuff, is bet against Lamar then, because that motherfucker covers the spread, right? Like the dude is like 55% against the spread in his career, 54% I think maybe. And the Raven, like, look, the sharp money is on the Ravens over. I mean, we talked to, I think it was Rob Zola even said, I don't want to give away his bets, but like he gave it away. I think he talked about it on Circles Off. Like he's on the Ravens over. I know, some of that has to do with Cleveland, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, like, I mean, I don't know. Like last year, that team missed both tackles. That team had all their running backs out. Wide receiver position was a joke. The defense struggled, and
defensive backs were decimated.
Yeah, and they were still 8-3 when he started his last game. Like, and so I look at this thing, and I think, again, and I'm not like, look, I'm not saying quarterback wins are a quarterback stat. I'm more of the belief that like every stat is useful. And when you look at EPA per play, when you look at, win, like Lamar wins games, right? And there's an aspect of, being able to control the clock. There's an aspect, and it's different. This is not Nick Chubb running the ball, however good he is. This is not Derrick Henry running the ball. We know from statistics, and we know that quarterback runs are different because of depth of first contact, because of like expected points added. We also know that scrambles are extremely valuable. And with the perfectly covered play stuff, we know that if you can avoid an incompletion and scramble for yardage when the play is perfectly covered, you add a ton of value. And then add on top of that, Lamar Jackson is literally the best player in the NFL at both of those things. There's value there. So, for the folks that want to hate on Lamar, that's fine. And look, I don't think he's a great passer. I think he's an okay passer. And it's kind of, but he's been consistent. His completion percentage has been 64.4, 64.4, 64.3, I think the last 3 years. Like he's a good enough passer. This isn't like Cam Newton, like 57% or something like that. This is a guy that can complete passes, and then the run kills you. Now, the questions about whether to extend him and all that kind of stuff, I get that. And like whether you want to, the Ravens are turning every stone, but this is a situation where I think if you do sloppy analysis, you are going to come to the wrong conclusion about Lamar Jackson.
Here's the analogy for everybody out there. Judging Lamar Jackson on only his passing ability would be like judging the both of us only on our podcasting ability.
Right.
That fair?
That's probably fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually think Lamar as a passer last year, I was encouraged by, and I was bummed, obviously, as everyone was, that he got injured, because I think it would have been really interesting to see how that year had ended up. Their defense was so decimated that we were going to have to see Lamar win games with his arm, and he was. So, let's hold the criticism of him as a player for a second. Before we move on to bets not to make and bets to make, a quick reminder to all of our members of the syndicate, because we take care of our members, right? As some podcasts you go to, they don't care about you. We care about you. And one of the ways that we are showing our appreciation is by reminding you that fantasy football season has already begun. Go to Underdog Fantasy, get yourself prepared for your redraft league by playing in some real money. It's not a ton of money. Best ball leagues, $10 million in total prizes with Best Ball Mania. And here's the great thing. If you use promo code PFF, when you deposit $100, they'll match it for you. And when you play 10 of those dollars, they'll give you a free PFF subscription. So do that. Go to PFF, read our fantasy content, use our fantasy tools to help you prepare, and then you can go dominate. And if you don't want to sign up for Underdog Fantasy, I get it. I understand it. 40% off with promo code PFF40 right now for all PFF annual subscriptions for first-time subscribers. So go over to PFF.com, get yourself in a great situation for the entirety of the year. I promise you will not be disappointed. By the way, because I said we treat our listeners the right way, you will have an opportunity to be one of the first people to use the PFF app when it drops. Before anyone else on the planet gets it, you'll be one of those people. So go head over to PFF.com, get yourself a little taste with a PFF subscription for 40% off. Okay. Bets not to make. It's the off season. Let me tell you how much of an off season it is. I found myself last night with the MLB All-Star game on, and I was actually entertained for like 10 minutes. Now, that was 10 minutes. The rest of it was a complete trash fest. But they did a segment. They had a half inning where the pitcher was mic'd up, and he was an entertaining guy. I'd never heard of him before, like half the MLB players that are out there. And the announcers were talking to him, and he was talking to his catcher and talking to the batters. It was engaging. It's that time of the year where you can convince yourself to make bad bets.
Yeah. As somebody who, I had Julio in the home run derby at like 8-1. I thought it was a lock. It was like in the head-to-head, he was like minus 1,000 against the dude from the Nationals, Soto. And of course, I pile a little bit more on, of course, when it was like plus 100, because he was. And then of course, Soto wins the Electoral College, not the popular vote.
Right.
And that was horrible. But yeah, and so our friend actually, and like I've reached out to him. Hopefully we can get him on the show because I really like his bombast. I really like how he goes after some of the folks that say dumb things on Twitter. Our friend Joey Kanish 22. What's not a great use of your capital / bankroll, despite seeing a million threads on it this summer? Middling NFL season-long player props to get the same return putting your money in a 6-month CD at the moment. This is an important notion, right? Because I'm going to actually show, I think, I'm going to show like kind of, so here's the thing, and it's easy to calculate these, but like if you are, so let's say you're lucky enough to get into a book that gives you minus 110 lines, whether that be totals or player props or whatever. In order let's say that you get minus 110 on both sides, that middle, right? If you try to get a middle, has to hit 4.8% of the time for that bet to be break even. Does that make sense, right? So, if you, on one side you lose the vig, on the other side you lose the vig if you don't hit the middle, but obviously in the middle you get 2 units, right? You bet one on each side.
Mm-hmm.
For a minus 115, which is probably more likely the juice you're going to get in most books on player props, it's about 7%. So you need that middle portion to hit about 7% of the time. And then for a 20-cent line, which is a lot of books, for a middle to make sense, that middle has to hit more than 9% of the time for your bet to be more than break even. So I think it's actually instructive. So this is a tweet. And I think that this is one of the ones that set off our friend Joe Kanish. Cole 80 stats. FanDuel has Trevor Lawrence's 2022 passing yard line at 3,800.5, and that seems too low to me. DraftKings has it at 4,000.5 yard. A 200-yard discount if you like T-Law this year, or arbitrage. And it's not arbitrage, one.
No, it's not.
But because you need, you're still, this isn't the same thing as and our friend Sharp Clark talked about this before, and this isn't the same, but I know what he's getting at. It's like a middle, right? But arbitrage is truly like where you make a profit on both sides.
Yeah, you make a
on
profit.
both sides. And and those do exist, by the way, in like over-unders. Usually usually you have to have a really square book or whatever, and you have to like calculate out even they don't have to both be plus money for it to make sense. Like you can, work
Arbitrage. So let me be clear here. Arbitrage is the simultaneous buying and selling that locks you in a profit, right? So people have been doing this with, like, a lot of people do this with crypto. If you have a big enough bankroll, the way to actually, if you were actually truly arbitraging this, would be if you could buy each bet and then simultaneously sell those bets to people who price them differently, right? And make a profit that way. But you can't.
But you need, and look, it's an inexpensive, like I said, if you have an edge, or if there is an edge to be had, or these things are mispriced, then absolutely. Like you have there's a difference between arbitrage and positive EV plays, right? And so that one, like, okay, do you believe in, and I'm going to assume both of these are minus 115 lines because FanDuel and DraftKings are sort of similar books. Do you think that those 200 yards make up for Trevor Lawrence more than 7% of the distribution in his passing yards? Like, that's a question you have to answer. And none of these tweets do that. And again, far be it for me to say that, but and we'll have a simulation at some point, where subscribers can actually look at, what we believe that the meat of that distribution is. But again, like, you have to make that calculation. Here's one that somebody suggested that I actually do think is worth it. So this is Dan _back, a 2-touchdown middle opportunity here for Harris, season-long touchdowns per scores odds. And again, this is FanDuel has him at over 7.5 minus 112 and under 9.5 for Caesars at minus 115. Now, the reason for this, by the way, is that FanDuel is actually fairly sharp and Caesars is as sharp as a marble. Their lines, especially in the offseason, I mean, you can still get Detroit, I want to say, at over 6 wins, minus 10 something. It's truly a God's gift if you want to tie your money there with the Emperor. So, like, let's round up here. Let's make the over 7.5 minus 115, just makes the math easier. But do you believe that 7% of Harris's outcomes land on 8 touchdowns or 9 touchdowns? That seems reasonable, right, George? Like, that's not so bad, right?
I don't think that's terrible. I guess the feeling of having a middle versus actually having one in practice are not equally or properly aligned, I guess. I think you feel good about yourself having picked up the middle more so than the middle actually will benefit you in the long run, which is, I think, why people like tweeting about it. It makes them feel smart and they're like, oh, look what I've done. And there are a lot of really, really stupid people out there who just, like, actually not even stupid people, just people who don't spend their lives doing this shit. And they are going to read that and go, oh yeah, this person must know what they're talking about. That's why we're here. We're just here to do the good deeds for the people.
And I remember, early on in my betting career, I actually exactly remember the game. It was a Falcons-Bucks game where I think I took the Falcons plus 2.5, and the market loved the Falcons that year. And I came back with Panthers at plus 1.5. Right. And I thought I was the smartest person in the world because the market moved 3 points with me, right? Or 4 points with me. And like, we obviously know now that those 4 points are not necessarily worth it, right? Like, in that case, they're both minus 110. So you have to make a case that points 2, 1, 0 in a regular season game and minus 1 add up to 5% or so, which depends upon like the total of the game, but that's a wash at best, right? So, that's, again, like, having these little intuitions about this stuff. Again, I agree. Like, we like to think, oh my God, I got minus 4.5. I laid 4.5 and the game closed 5.5. And so should I take plus 5.5? It's like, no, Like that's not that the fifth point is not worth 5%, right? So it's so stupid. But if you do, like, let's say you laid 2.5 and the game's now sitting 3.5 in the NFL, well, 3, depending upon the total, is worth like 7 to 9%. So there you're doing great, right? Like, you should take that middle because it obviously has some value. Again, hopefully everybody's sort of getting smarter about these things, but your point, like, people feel smart by being able to take a number. And I get this a lot with CFL. Like I took 5.5. Bunch of COVID came out that I heard about and wasn't, and now the game's 3, right? And it's like, do I want to take -3 now? And it's like, no, actually my model says it's 2 still. Like, and we can get to a discussion on a different podcast about whether to hedge, and like, most sharp bettors will say don't hedge unless it's life-changing money, or the hedge bet is plus EV, which usually if your internals tell you to bet a number, in football, you're almost never going to have an opportunity where the hedge bet is plus EV unless it goes through 3. And in which case, if the market pushes a number through 3, your initial bet was probably correct, but like the things have changed so much, maybe where laying than the -2.5 or something like that would not be worth it. I mean, markets are extremely sharp, so you're not going to get a ton of opportunities to do this, but it's important to know what you're up against if you do it anyway.
Yeah, no, that's it's a good point, and I think it's one that we need to bless. By the way, I read a funny tweet that I'll tell you, which is one of the accounts I follow that does kind of like makes fun of, not makes fun of, but like memes on the financial world, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a tweet about a guy who was an intern at an investment bank who signed all of his emails, even to like, higher ups and everything, blessings. And I just imagine in my mind, like a 20-year-old kid with like a earring and a tattoo, like emailing some like 60-year-old managing director, like, hey, here's the deck you were looking for that I've assuredly fucked up 9 ways since Sunday. Blessings, Kyle.
Okay, can we like let's again, this podcast has been kind of slow. We'll give out a bet at the end here. Let's talk about the best sign-offs on emails, because I think just a good best is probably the safest one. I think, and obviously there are cultural differences here, but cheers is, I think it depends. If it's your PhD advisor from Germany, hi Brigitte, like if you listen to the show, then she could be like, look, this is the worst paper you've ever written, Eric. Come back to my office and we'll chat. Cheers. Like cheers kind of stings a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, my, so-and-so has cancer. Cheers. Like that kind of thing, I get a little like unnerving about, but I do know cheers is like sort of like a, best kind of thing. Sincerely works, but it's still kind of like what do you think where do you think the line is there for canned email sign off messages? Blessings is way
over the line. Yeah, you can't be blessing every person that you talk to on email. That's so just disingenuous. Like you do not have enough blessings to give away, buddy. I don't know who you are, but you don't have that many blessings. Please keep more of them to yourself. Here's a couple that are on my radar. Regards, I'm not a huge fan of. Not a huge fan of regards.
Is that because of the movie Couples Retreat?
Please regard me.
Regard me is honest to God the best one-liner in a movie that actually has a fairly decent amount of one-liners.
Regard me. How do you feel about best? Everyone uses best, and I try to use it less and less, to be honest with you.
I used to sign off with my friends EE, but the second E was undercase. That one,
Jesus.
that, like I said, blessings. That one was
really not given a
yeah,
fuck.
I don't do that anymore. I think it's just awkward. I think human interactions are awkward. Now, how many people? So here's another good one. Text messages. Like, what age is it appropriate to sign off on a text message? You've had this happen before,
No
right?
age. There's no age.
Okay, but
There's
you've had it
no
happen to
age.
you, right? You've had it happen to you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Where the text message is clearly like an email template.
It's the best.
Sincerely. Okay. Next show we'll dive deeper into this topic for every one of you that are really interested.
Yeah.
The bet that you just made this week is what?
Yeah, so we had a few things. Our great colleague and friend Ben Lindsay was helping with Sunday Night Football, because in like 2 short weeks we're gonna be watching some football, some preseason football. So I reran the simulation. Interestingly, and I think this is how well we've regressed. Sort of like how I actually just think it's how good our power rankings are. But we only see 3 edges in the Super Bowl market. I also think it's partially because DraftKings Super Bowl market has a lot of overround. But the 3 that we see value in, okay. And what's interesting here is that so we see 2% edge. So we make Tampa Bay plus 601 to win the Super Bowl. DraftKings you can get plus 700. So that's a 2% edge. I like that one a lot.
Any middles I can get there?
So Circa will actually let you buy the no.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So that one's good. But interestingly, like, we're dead nuts on the win total. So we have Tampa at 11.5. The market is 11.5. The Tampa's a fat tail team. I think the next team I'm going to talk about is also this way. We make Green Bay at 10.93 wins. The market is at 11. However, we make Green Bay at plus 814 to win the Super Bowl. The market has them at 10-1. So that's a 2% edge. I think it's fairly clear what Green Bay is doing here, right? Green Bay is, and there's an article that I wrote on PFF.com. We talked about this a couple weeks ago with Kevin O'Connell and Ron Rivera, and you had Tomlin. There are a lot of conditionals here. If Green Bay figures out the wide receiver position, they're a Super Bowl contender, right? Because their defense is much better than it was last year. Offensive line should get healthier with Bakhtiari coming back and some guys getting experience. Zach Tom, I think, was a great draft pick out of Wake Forest. Running back positions go, all this stuff is great for Green Bay. It's just like they don't have anybody to throw to. If the wide receiver position's figured out, this team's a Super Bowl contender, right? So that doesn't mean I'd bet their win total over, but I would take a fat tail shot at something like 10-1 for Green Bay to win the Super Bowl. And similarly, we make Cincinnati 9.985 wins, and their win total is 10. So right dead there. But we make them plus 1962 to win the Super Bowl, and the market is giving them is 22-1. So that's a 1% edge. I think it's exactly what it says. If the defense comes, no one saw more clearly the sort of, if things come together for the Bengals, they come together. And I think that those 3 bets are probably pretty sound.
My favorite one is the Bucks. And the reason for that is, in my very humble opinion, Tom Brady did not come back for a season to go out the way that he went out. They're playing in just an awful conference in an awful division. All due respect to the New Orleans Saints, and the pathway for them to get home field throughout the playoffs, and then to play a team from the AFC who has been through the absolute ringer, I love. So, 7-1, look, you're tying your money up for a little while, but like, if you're going to be rooting for someone all the way through the Super Bowl, you're going to get, I think, your money's worth with Tampa Bay, given the fact that, I think I feel pretty confident in Brady making it decently far. So that's the one that I'm there for. Green Bay similarly in the NFC, but with Green Bay, I just have more questions offensively, and it's honestly all, Devontae Adams. I just think that's he's the best receiver in the NFL. So that's a big loss.
Yeah, I think with a lot of these, you're really like, if you do like a Tampa Bay Green Bay thing, you're really just hoping that the rest of the NFC teams suck as much as we think, and there isn't some team that pops up as a team that's legit. Like, you're hoping that every team that makes the playoffs in a Philadelphia Eaglesian way last year is as bad as the Eagles were, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, because we saw the Eagles get into the playoffs and then they had like no chance. And, you know, so that they were an encouraging team, but not a contender. You know, the Eagles this year could very well be a contender, but like if Minnesota or New Orleans or New York Giants or Detroit or Washington, some team like that makes the playoffs this year, what your hope is that they're still not that good. And in fact, that could actually help. That actually does benefit the Green Bays and the Tampas of the world, because even the team that doesn't get the bye will have sort of a patsy in round one and be able to advance that way.
We used the word patsy. We talked about email sign-offs. We hunted down bad article content for our listeners. I don't know what else. What are there podcast awards that can be won? Because we're on deck for one after
podcast
this.
Bingo, I think was struck today. We even talked about the theater. We talked about everything. On today's show. Tune in. Very eclectic show.
Tune in on Sunday, where Eric and I will do in-depth breakdowns of the richest men in the world in swimsuits and talk about all of their the problems. I cannot get enough of Elon Musk on his yacht. I don't care how many billions. It's a hot take.
Dude, do you know who he looks like? He looks like SpongeBob.
He looks like white, Sponge. His skin is so white that it makes paper look dark. I mean,
You're talking about his skin. What is my brother in Christ's chest?
There are a lot of problems. Look, there are a lot of problems to the point
he's shaped like a rectangular prism.
That's a rectangular white sponge. I don't know how many billions of dollars he's worth now. I don't need him. I can't look like that. I can't.
As somebody who is currently undergoing a
reform.
Yeah. But like, I agree. I just can't. So let's end on this. As somebody like, and this is analytics too, like basically just get a scale and weigh yourself, collect data. And even that act is so liberating as far as like the transformation, right? You're actually like collecting data. You're taking stock and inventory. When you have good days, it measures. When you have bad days, all this stuff. Like I cannot tell you how nice it feels to never feel bad anymore, right? You know, like when you have like, you know, when you like when we go out to Jeff Ruby's, I would be like this, you know, like I love hanging out with you guys, but like I can't honestly incorporate a steak today. You know what I mean? And now it's just like, you know, dinner cruise or whatever. I have a pretty hefty meal, but like it's like now that you have control over things, it's sort of like, oh my God. You never like appreciate how good it feels to just not feel bad, you know, like that. And I want for my brother in Christ, Elon, to feel that way.
Tune in 2 podcasts from now where we will dive deeply into the topic of physical health. It will be a great podcast. I just had an idea. Instead of us giving people recommendations, people recommend things they want our recommendation on. And then we have to go buy it or try it and then let people know whether they like it.
By the way, if you want to sponsor any of those things, sponsors, come get us.
Yeah, if you have hair thickening products, Eric would love to see if they work. That's our podcast.
Hey.
We love you all. Peace.